Hey everybody, it's Bust, and today we're talking about the Legends of Runeterra 2024 State of the Game. And so it's a bit of a bummer video if you're not current on the Riot news. Riot did decide to lay off 10% of their staff, with bigger portions of that coming out of the Legends of Runeterra team. And you know, when you hear of something like Microsoft cutting their staff, or I don't know, Salesforce cutting their staff, you don't really give a shit. You know, it's like kind of unfortunate in the sense that 3,000 people just lost their jobs or whatever, but it really hits a lot harder having the cuts come at Riot since you have such a personal connection to the game, right? I don't go out and like fanboy Microsoft stuff. I don't preach what an amazing product, Windows is, and I don't go and seek out the development team at Windows to hear what the next fucking awesome notepad app is going to be. But like with the Riot space and the Legends of Runeterra in particular, really, has that kind of community feel to it. And it kind of feels like a friend lost their job in that space, or, one of your other friends is having a bad work experience because the layoffs happened. And so it's a bummer. I feel truly, sad for the folks at Riot that have to deal with that. And hopefully it all works out better for everyone in the end. The other kind of thing that kind of struck with me as people start dooming on the future of Runeterra and how it's already removed from the world and it's non-existent anymore is, as I grew up in life, I played Magic, and just the large core collection of my friends all came from the Magic community. And so it wasn't just like people that we were playing a game with. These are people that, like graduated college with and traveled with and partied with and had get togethers with. And then eventually people had kids and shit. And you go to weddings and stuff. And it wasn't just like, people that I played a competitive game with on Friday night. It was just a core part of my life for so long. And then as I moved from West Virginia to Kansas City, I kind of had that experience again. It's like, how was I, as an old ass man, go about meeting new people and making new friends in this new space? And I did kind of a similar journey with board games and jumping into the board game community out here and meeting a lot of now lifelong friends that way as well. And so it's definitely a big heart punch to have such a devastating thing run across the community, not just for the employees at Riot themselves that have to find new jobs and find new work, the content creators that are kind of counting on Runeterra as their source of income, but then also that community level of people just hanging out in Discord, or you found Runeterra at a bad time in your life, or Runeterra brought you out of a dark hole or something, or you didn't realize how much fun you could have with card games, whatever. It's kind of a bummer when that experience gets darkened. And so for me, hopefully, things move better forward from here. I'm not as doom and gloom as you may see across the space of Twitter in terms of the future of Runeterra on the whole. But that's what we're kind of here to talk about for the rest of the video. And then we'll touch on our channel's future as well as we get a little bit later on. And so there's, two articles to pull up in terms of the breadth of the changes within the sphere of Legends of Runeterra. On the Riot main page, they do discuss the changes at Riot, and it does make it look fairly doomy in terms of Legends of Runeterra, right? The Riot has this big section to where they're doubling down on the games at the center, their kind of core products that they're going to be supporting. And you have League of Legends and Valorant and Teamfight Tactics and Wild Rift, and that's kind of the end of the sentence. There's no Legends of Runeterra in there, and so that's kind of a bummer. They make a note of Project L, which I believe is the fighting game. They don't make a note of the MMO, which I've heard rumors of is now being canceled, but that's moving forward. But then as you get down here a little bit further, you have Legends of Runeterra tied in with the Riot Forge section. Riot Forge is now completely gone. They're removing those indie game developments from Riot, and then they speak a bit of LOR's journey. So to speak word for word as to what it has here, as LOR continues its journey, we're making changes to move the game towards sustainability. We know there's a passionate community who love the game. Despite critical achievements that's played to build the world of Runeterra, it's faced financial challenges since launch, costing significantly more to develop and support than it generates in return. And so as a result, they're going to reduce the size of their team and then renew the focus onto Path of Champions. And so they believe that the PvE space is the way forward for the Legends of Runeterra. And that's interesting to see as we had the game released. To me, the focus was on Expedition. Expeditions got axed. Lab of Legends came out and was wildly popular. That spawned the Path of Champions. Path of Champions was going to become the focus. The dude that ran Path of Champions left Riot, so they switched to the PvE focus with the Dave Guskin years at the helm. And now that this Riot layoff has happened, they are moving back to PvE, and so it's a bit of that snip, snap, snip, snap, snip, snap in the Michael Scott era, if you will, of things. But moving into the main article, it does outline a lot of these same things. There's mention of the laser focus into PvE, and then that space back into Path of Champions. And I'm curious to see how it plays out. The big thing to kind of take away from this is the space of moving forward, what to expect out of the client. There's going to be more notes coming in the upcoming week. And so we'll come back to that. We'll come back to this kind of February second style of moment. That'll be a thing that we talk about in terms of moving forward with our channel. But the thing to me that kind of spikes with all of this is you do have to get to kind of a certain point to where the game just makes money, or you can call it a Costco hot dog, right? Costco loses money on hot dogs, but it does bring people in the door, allow them to kind of sit around and hang out. You don't go to Costco for the hot dogs, but it's kind of a bonus, right? And so they're willing to get you inside the store with that dollar hot dog because you're going to come in and spend $150 elsewhere. And so that's kind of the same idea there, but I don't think that that's the way Legends of Runeterra is viewed anymore, as much as the community likes to think of it being that way. But one of the interesting articles that I pulled up from Days of Old, this is from October the 15th of 2019. This would have been about 6 months before the game was released, to where they talk about building a better card game through progression. And I think this is kind of at the heart of what has really caused Legends of Runeterra the problem up to this point. The kind of key paragraph being right through here is to where, yet even with the move from paper to digital, the card game genre continues to be built on the foundation of randomized card packs. The typical systems for card acquisition, what we call progression, are notorious for prioritizing business over experience. And so I think that's kind of, bummer point number one to call out in this space is, I guess the business end perhaps should have been prioritized a little bit more, but they move on to say it's common to require players to make repeated purchases with little or no control out of the outcome. That's the loot box structure. And the best stuff is often far out of reach for a genre that's all about having choices and making decisions when building a deck or dueling an opponent. Some of that feels frustrating through the loot box structure. And to me, I feel like Riot was kind of going about this in an interesting direction. I don't know if you remember the gaming space back in that kind of 2019 era, but it was right in the space of loot boxes being a big deal and gambling being attached to loot boxes. And I think Counter-Strike is the big one that has the loot box gambling structure to it. And then this kind of introducing children to the aspects of gambling. And I believe maybe like a Norway or a Sweden or some Scandinavian country banned loot boxes, and it looked like something that was going to be pushed throughout the EU. And then the next question starts to be, is opening a booster pack, or is opening a Hearthstone pack, or opening a Legends of Runeterra card pack counting as a loot box and then counted as gambling? And so I think Riot kind of doesn't directly mention it in this space, but there's certainly a bit of worry if the core money making structure of your video game is about to get banned. Are you allowed to have that as your kind of core feature in terms of moving forward? And as we've gotten to now, like currently, what are we in 2024? Are we like 4 years away from this? I don't think that kind of loot box ban has really materialized. I think where it has been banned, the people have figured out the stupid workarounds to where it's like you're buying end-game currency unit, and as a bonus you also get a loot box to go with it. It seems like those kind of fears that were probably very big at the time, if you want the core monetization structure of your game to be based on loot boxes, that if that gets banned or gets removed from existence, then you're kind of fucked. And so I think Riot was, on one hand, they are correct in that the loot box structure is pretty shitty. It is much nicer to be able to go out and just like purchase the specific card or the specific thing that you want and not be kind of locked behind it. But at the end of the day, every game that you've seen make it this far in terms of card games have had this loot box structure. So Magic has booster packs, Hearthstone had some kind of pack structure to it. What is it? Marvel Snap is arguably the most predatory loot box game to date, but it's successful. It's up and running. And the games that have kind of fallen by the wayside. Oh, the Eternal. Eternal was the last one I could remember that still has some of that aspect to it. It's still a very small game, very small player base, but it's been up and running for well over 10 years now, I think. But the kind of space of this free to play, the cards are free to acquire, and then we're going to sell you cosmetics kind of thing just hasn't worked out. Gwent tried it, it didn't work. The Elder Scrolls Legends tried it, and it didn't work. Now Legends of Runeterra was the next big one to have it come about, and it didn't really work. And so that's a bit unfortunate. That's piece number one. I'm sure Riot is trying to come up with new ways to monetize the game and have this new progression go forward in terms of keeping the game sustainable. The other kind of problem to me in the sense was expedition. They touch on it a little bit further in the article about the design of the game and the way that this game flow was going to work. As if you don't remember at the very release of the game, or if you didn't play at the very release of the game, the way that the progression structure worked was you couldn't just go and get all of the cards. You couldn't go and just buy all of the cards. The way that you were supposed to get the cards were you had 3 expedition trials per week. If you did a certain number of wins, I think if you got 6 wins in your expedition trial, you got a champion wild card. I think if you got 5 wins, you got a random champion, or maybe you got a random champion for participating, and that was it, right? You could go to the store after that and buy like 3 champion wildcards, but in any given week, you were very, very limited in the number of champions that you could get. Like maybe there was some more in the weekly chest, right? So if there were like 3 from Expedition and 3 from the store, and then 1 from the weekly chest, you got 7 champions in a week. However many champions were there in the initial game, like 18. And so that was going to take you 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks, however long that math plays out, to generate all of the champions. And so right as soon as the game came out, there was just such a gigantic shit fit over this style of progression. People didn't want to play Expedition. It was one of the least popular gaming formats of all time, which was a ultra bummer. I think it was one of the best draft formats of all time. But people also threw a huge shit fit that you couldn't just go buy the champions you wanted, play 3 or 4 different decks on the ladder, and go on from there. And so Riot really, really got hamstrung right from the beginning, right from the release of the video game, with number one, they had this kind of new novel monetization system that didn't focus on loot boxes, and number two, they had it tied in to you having to purchase wild cards through the game store to get the champions. People hated it so much they immediately had to change it and let you just purchase infinite wild cards right from the start. Now, as far as that goes, the monetization structure was still kind of fucked in terms of the craftable materials being too easy to obtain, and Riot never doing anything to combat inflation. But I think kind of right from the get-go, the game was really seriously hampered by both of these strategies. Number one, the wild card monetization, and number two, the space of expedition. And so, place your blame where you want. Agree or disagree with how those things went. It doesn't seem like it's really worked out. To me, why they haven't done anything in the past 4 years to kind of try and alleviate that and change it or make it work in a different kind of structure or function is beyond me. Maybe it's just too deeply ingrained within the game. Maybe there's legal reasons. Maybe it's too much effort to swap it out. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is there, but it's been what seems to be the biggest problem of the game from the start. The other one I wanted to pull out, I don't have a handy infographic for it, but I just put pandemic release on here. It makes a nice little easier change on the screen that's easier for me to see. And this is another one of the spots that really struck me as kind of a bummer for the game. Now, the way that the kind of release structure was going for the game was the open beta, or at least the last beta section that they had open was like around this time in 2020. It was at some point in January, the middle of January, they had some kind of open beta. There was a plan to have another beta test before the actual full-on release of the game. But in March, whenever it hit of 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic hit, and then Riot just released the game. Now, there's a couple of different points within that that are kind of interesting to me. The first one is you can kind of ask yourself, was it rushed, right? Would they have been able to figure out the monetization didn't work? Would they have been able to figure out that people don't like having to play Expedition? Would they have been able to figure out this or that and had more time to kind of fine tune the release? You know, if you have an extra 6 months of time and an extra beta period before the game's released, would you have been able to figure it out within that time space? That's, a question in hindsight I would have no idea towards the answer to, but I think it's an interesting thing to bring up. The second kind of point is, what kind of games do you want to play during a lockdown, right? And I thought that was kind of an odd strategy to release a game like Legends of Runeterra during the lockdown. It makes some sense, right? You say, okay, people are stuck at home. You can't leave your house. You have to be stuck within your house for literally 24 hours a day for 2, 4, 6, 8 weeks on end. You're probably going to be bored as fuck and looking for a video game to play. But when do people really kind of find the space to play a card game, right? When are you sitting around and playing this? Now, the degenerates like myself will sit around and just play children's card game for 6, 8 hours on end and not have too much trouble with it. But the general public doesn't do that, right? You'll wake up in the morning, you have 15 minutes before you have to leave for work, so you play a game. You go to work, you're on your shit break, you're sitting there taking a dump, you play a game. You got 20 minutes before the next meeting at work, you don't want to do anything in Excel, you play a game. You go out to lunch, you have 45 minutes, you take 20 minutes of it eating, you get 2 games in, right? This isn't really going to be the structure of your life during the middle of a pandemic, right? You're going to say, oh, cool, I got my 8 hours of work in. Now I have 8 hours with fuck all to do. Let's sit around and play 8 hours of Skyrim or 8 hours of Grand Theft Auto or some kind of like world building game that takes, 100 hours, 140 hours, 160 hours to complete. You're not out here trying to play some kind of like 15-minute thing before the next moment in your life happens, because that next moment in your life is 8 hours away and it's you going to sleep. And so, it just feels like just the kind of timing of it. I know you can't predict what's going to happen in a pandemic and people's reaction and responses to it, but it felt like it was a improperly timed thing, right? How many people are sitting on the bus on their way to work? How many people are sitting in the car on the way to class? How many people are, at that meeting that they're just zoned out of playing on their phone? Like, those spaces just don't really exist during a pandemic. And while it doesn't affect the core gameplay, it really affects the momentum of the release of the game, as to where, you pick it up, you play it for an hour, and you're like, oh, that was neat. Now I'm kind of done. I'm going to go jump into one of these more long form games, or I'm going to go watch 8 episodes of The Tiger King, or whatever you're going to fucking do with your day. It just was not very conducive to the release of a digital card game. And so I think that those were kind of like the 2 big things that kind of led up to this point, in the sense that the monetization wasn't fully thought through. It didn't have enough time under the microscope to really get enough testing in. And then part 2, the pandemic release was not a very conducive time to release a game of this structure. And so we've talked about LOR's past. Now we'll talk about LOR's future. And this is all speculative. I have no insider knowledge at Riot. I don't know anyone at Riot. I most certainly don't speak to anyone at Riot because I don't know anyone there. And these are just kind of what I feel is going to happen with the future of the game. And so, as you can see in the article, they plan on moving towards Path of Champions as their space of monetization. They did this in the past. Then they swapped out to go to the competitive year with Dave Guskin, and now they're back to swapping into Path of Champions. My suspicion on what happened there is, if you think of how a tech company typically grows, and so if you look at something like Facebook or Twitter, it's not about figuring out a way to make money. It's a way to figure out how to get users, right? And so Facebook lost money for years and years. Facebook lost billions of dollars before they actually started to make money. But once they got to the point where they're like, oh, we have 500 million users, if we can get $1 a month out of these users, then we're going to be making a shitload of money every year. The same thing applies to Twitter. The same thing applies to Uber. The same thing applies to Netflix. You don't have to have the perfect strategy up front in terms of money making, but you have to have the users. And I think that that's probably what we're seeing out of the Legends of Runeterra. On the one hand, you have the large position of the player base, the people playing Path of Champions. I've seen numbers on Twitter, whether or not they're valid to any degree, I have no idea. But it sounds like of the active player base, 80% of the player base just plays Path of Champions. The problem with that 80% of the player base is they don't spend any money. The other side of the coin, that would leave the remaining 20% being people that just play PvP, be it on the casual queues or on the ranked ladder, that's in that 20%. And then the people that actually spend money on the game tend to be within that competitive space, a small sliver of that 20%. And so I kind of feel like the flip flopping that was happening was I can't remember the guy's name. It was like Eric maybe or something. I think he left Riot during the first venture into PVE to go to another company. I think that he was probably chasing after the user base, and then Dave Guskin probably disagreed and decided to focus on the people that are actually spending money. And now they're going back to that space of going after that larger player base and just figuring out a way to get someone in Path of Champions to actually spend money on the game. You don't have to do it at this point. It's really awkward spending money on Path of Champions. You go and buy an Ari skin and then you never have the chance to play Ari. Like you get all of these things. It just the monetization of the PvP spectrum does not align well with the monetization of the Path of Champions. And I think that that's what they're going to see focused on in the upcoming year. But in terms of the core game itself, the things that I expect to see, all of those experiments that they talked about, having new game modes on a monthly cadence and having a draft format and all that, that's completely gone. They're never going to see another word about any of those experiments for the remainder of the game. Anything within that lab space to where you can play Earth or you can play random card draw or something, those are going to get no support for the remainder of the game whatsoever. I would be willing to bet that Eternal gets no more support for the remainder of the game whatsoever, in the sense of balance changes, right? So I think that there will be focus on the standard format. The standard format balance changes will be applied backwards to Eternal since it's there. I don't think we're going to see an Eternal ranked queue ever again. You can go and play casual mode in Eternal. I don't think that they're going to flip flop the formats every few months to where you play standard for a bit and then you switch over to Eternal. I think that's completely gone. Uh, Moving forward with the rest of the stuff, Worlds, I think will still be a thing. I think you're still going to have some kind of competitive build up into a world champion kind of tournament because that's not very financially expensive to do. You don't have to go out and say this is the Legends of Runeterra $1 million world championship event. You're going to have a bunch of like $500 open events throughout the course of the year that qualify you for like a 10K at the end of the year. That 10K is going to be the world championship. And so while I don't think that stuff's going away, I think that it's going to be massively scaled back in terms of that ultimate kind of competitive scene. But what I do think will be interesting is how they plan to kind of update Gauntlet moving forward. And so at the end of the year, last season, towards this past season, I think maybe in like the November dev update, they were talking about making changes to Gauntlet to make it a little bit more palatable, to make the trophies more relevant. And to me, that's probably also a space to where they're going to come in and try and add in monetization. And so try to set it up more in the space of playing Ruthless Rumbles that cost $5 to enter, as opposed to just this spend your free gems that you'll never get rid of kind of event thing. And so I think that that is the way that it's going to go. At the bare minimum, ladder is still going to be here. There's still going to be new champion design. There's going to be new card design. Those are going to be hitting the game. They're going to hit the PvP ladder. There's going to be some kind of balance, and then those champions are going to funnel back over into Path of Champions. You can't have this space to where you just release a new champion to Path of Champions with no support around it, and it's such a kind of unified experience between the two that those two aren't going away. And so it's all of the extraneous stuff after that, like how deep are they willing to go with that? And so looking in the space of the competitive events, right, I think they'll still maintain the open tournaments. The open tournaments may or may not have cash dollars assigned to them. I would lead towards probably not. They're going to do something to Gauntlet to where there's, it's another kind of free thing to do, but they're going to add ways to get money spent within the Gauntlet so you have tournament entry fees. And then Worlds isn't going away. It's just going to be a lower dollar event, and they're not going to give up on that marketing that Worlds does actually exist. And so that's my thought on it. That's where I see the game going. I most certainly don't doom on it as far as it going away. If you were hoping to have a draft format, I would look towards another game. And as far as the competitive scene, I think it's going to be toned down, but not necessarily gone. And so, if we don't think the game's going away, what does that mean for the future of our channel? And so, to give a touch of a history lesson, it's something that kind of ties back to the aspect of community. And it's another reason why it hits so hard to kind of hear about the rioters losing their jobs, but then the impact through the rest of the Runeterra community is the way that I kind of got into making content is like I'd always kind of thought of doing it. The kind of big influence on me would have been like Luis Scott Vargas back in the olden days. Like it had to have been, I don't know, like 2010 ish or so, maybe plus or minus 2 or 3 years. That was well before the era of Twitch being a thing and everyone having their own Twitch stream, as well before the era of having YouTube content be super common. Right now, as you look at it in 2024, it's like I bet like the top 10% of the ladder all has a YouTube channel. Like everyone's out there doing it and stuff. But I was in the space to where you want to enjoy content from the game that you're playing, and it just doesn't exist. And so the random format that you like may not have content for it. It was basically if Luis was playing it, then you had content for it. If Luis wasn't playing it, you didn't. And so the kind of thought that I always had, the goal that I always wanted to kind of fill was I don't care if you like our content. I don't care if you like the quality of the gameplay or the videos. My thought is that the game I'm playing, the game I'm going to be enjoying, is there's going to be content out there for it. And so if you want to enjoy that kind of game, there's going to be something. Now, whether or not you enjoy it, that's a different story, but the content physically exists. It'll be out there for you to consume. If it's the game format I want to play, it's going to be there. And what that kind of tied into is I was having that conversation with a friend in the board game group and then thinking about making content and stuff. And he's like, well, why don't you do it? And it's like, well, I just haven't really gotten around to it. He's like, well, you should do it. And it's like, what? It's like, it's that easy, but sometimes you just need that kind of like little nudge. You need that little push from a friend or a buddy or a person in the community that just says, hey, just go and do it. And that's what it was. He said, hey, you should go and do it. And I was like, well, fuck it. You're right, man. Maybe I should. And that was, I don't know, 4 years ago or however long Runeterra's been out. But that's where I kind of stand in this space. And so with Runeterra, I initially planned on just playing it budget friendly. I wasn't going to spend money on the physical cards. I was just going to grind Expedition and get the cards that way, and then try to get a good ladder ranking as a free-to-play player. Now, it turns out that was kind of a fruitless effort given the cards were so easy to acquire, but it did get me really into the space of Expedition. I still stand by Expedition being the best limited format of any game up to this point in history. It is a real tragedy that Expedition didn't catch on and it got removed from the game. But that was the kind of space I was in, right? It's like, well, I want to play Expedition. I want to make sure that there's Expedition content out here. If you want to look for Expedition content, it's going to be there because I want it to be there. And so we did about 500 or so of those. The game the format got removed after Battles with Bust 500. And then we had to kind of figure out the next thing to do. There were some rumblings of a draft format being revisited and rethought on and coming into the future. And so it was like, well, we'll just play some Path of Champions. And I couldn't get into it. I couldn't really get my competitive fix in the Path of Champions. And so then I was like, well, I still like Runeterra. I want to give there a chance for the draft format to come back. We'll start playing Constructed. And so that's where we've been for the past 530 or so Battles with Busts before this big announcement hit. And so apparently the 500 battle mark is where things go down and things go bad. So whatever we get into next, look out for video number 500 because it's probably going to go to shit from there. But nonetheless, my kind of thoughts on the future is, again, I don't think the game's going away. It's going to be a matter of what the competitive scene looks like and what is offered up within the game. I would really love to be playing in a draft format. I think that is probably off the table in terms of Legends of Runeterra, but I have been having a wonderful time playing in the best of 3 and also the best of 1, and having it all be within the game client. The only game, to my knowledge, that you can get that with right now is with Magic. I have absolutely no desire to play Magic. I hate the resource system in Magic. I can't go back to it. I think it also exists within Eternal, but Eternal always feels to me like it's the kind of game that's on its last legs and it's about to fall apart. And as soon as we get into it, it's just going to go away. And so it's tough to kind of find that space to where you can come out and just play a limited format within a game. But I've really kind of grown to love this competitive space within Legends of Runeterra, with like the patch balance cadence and the switches between standard and eternal, and having the opens and then having the gauntlets hopefully be supported in some way. Like, I'm all on board with going down that path. And so as it stands for the future of what we're going to do with the channel, it's really going to kind of come down to what it sounds like in this February the 2nd announcement. And so if the game is going to be in the space to where there's something kind of competitive and kind of relevant within gauntlets, that's going to be a plus. If there's something within the space of the opens still existing, that's a definite plus. That's what really ties into playing like 3 weeks of best of 1, and then playing a really serious week of best of 3, and then the patch kind of changes and you get to play 3 weeks of best of 1 and another week of best of 3. Like, the switch between the two is so much fun, and I really come to enjoy all of that. If that kind of thing sticks around, then I'm on board. Now, the thing that I won't be on board with is if it's just going to be ladder. I can't have like the extent of my existence in the space of Legends of Runeterra just be grinding ladder all of the time. I don't enjoy that. There has to be that kind of change up and mix up and change of pace that you get switching from best of 1 to best of 3, and then the patch hitting, and then like I just get so tired and so bored of playing the same format over and over and over again. And so that is kind of like plan number 1. If Runeterra kind of maintains some of this competitive feel, even if it means gutting out all of the monetary prize, I'm fine with it. I'm on board. If it's just going to be best of 1 ladder, then I'm going to look somewhere else. And the somewhere else, I haven't entirely decided on what that might be. I do enjoy playing Teamfight Tactics. My problem with Teamfight Tactics is I really like having a game that I can play at the gym for 30 minutes on the cardio bike. Like, that's what I do in the mornings. Is I go to the gym, I lift weights, and then I do a half hour of cardio. It's very conducive playing something like Legends of Runeterra, to where you don't have to have manual dexterity to do it. You have time to stop and think and stuff, and it's very conducive playing card games in that setting. And Teamfight Tactics is not. And so that's kind of a strike down for it, is the timing doesn't really work, but it is a good game. It's kind of draft centric. It's within the sphere of Riot. Riot lists it within their core games to focus on. I'm definitely interested, if we have to switch into Teamfight Tactics. The other thought I have is going back to Hearthstone. I don't like super love going back to Hearthstone. It does fit more within the style of the way I like to handle my videos, to where it's not just like 100% educational, unless you want to learn about putting dish soap in a dishwasher, or you want to learn about, some of the finer things in life that I can teach you youngsters. It's within the space of Hearthstone, you do have that time of where I'm going to take a moment to talk about my turn, talk about the game, and then while you're waiting on your opponent to do something, you can talk about cats and stuff, right? And so I do kind of like that nature of Hearthstone. I do like that there's a lot of game modes available. So if we want to play arena, it's there. The kind of standard ladder thing is there. There is no like real competitive scene within the Hearthstone, right? There's no tournament client within the game. It's never going to see it at this point. And so that is a real kind of strike against it, kind of compared to the space of Legends of Runeterra. But that's where I kind of stand at this point. So like idea number 1 thing I would love to have happen is the competitive scene in Runeterra is not gutted. If it is, I'll probably be switching into Teamfight Tactics, but again, I can't play Teamfight Tactics on the cardio bike. I know it sounds as like an absurd reason to not want to play a game, but it's a reason nonetheless. I really grind my Hearthstone in the morning. You anti-gen players in the morning are wonderful. I love you. Whatever time it is in your time zone when I'm on a cardio bike at 6 a.m., I'm glad that you're there in the queue. And then if I don't feel good about going into the Teamfight Tactics space, then it's probably back to Hearthstone. And so that's it. Again, man, many condolences for those of you that lost your jobs. I hope the intern still has his space at Riot. The intern is the guy at Riot that watches my videos, takes all of my good ideas, and then runs them up the flagpole. And so I hope you were able to maintain your job. The people within the community that have a very big connection to the game and the people within it, I hope you're all doing okay as well. And I hope everyone gets to kind of ride out of this thing in good shape. But nonetheless, we'll still be here. We'll still be putting these nice little videos together, and hopefully you enjoy it if that's what you're looking for. So that's going to do it for us today. I hope everyone enjoyed the video. Hope you maybe learned a thing or two along the way. I had a good time watching. This is Bust, and we thank you for being here.